Sheher-e-Kesh, a trade center in Central Asia, where Temur Lung was born. The city is now called Sheher-e-Sabz. Here lived a chieftain of the Lachin tribe. His name was Saifuddin Mahmud. The entire Middle Eastern region did trade with India. Samarkand, Tirmiz, Bukhara and Balkh were famous cities of their time. The great fortress town of Balkh had 1,200 mosques and 200 hammams. Across the river Amu, Tirmiz, and on this side, Balkh. Both were completely destroyed by the hordes of Genghis Khan. Totally ruined, bereft of hearth and home, the Amirs set out with their caravans of horses and camels. The cry on their lips was, "Let us go to Hindustan, the house of peace and shelter." Did you hear? There are 15 new settlements all over Delhi. People from far and wide are coming to Delhi with their families and possessions. We too shall find refuge in Hindustan. Sultan Iltutmish took a great liking for Saifuddin Mahmud, the father of Amir Khusrau. The Sultan bestowed on him some land beyond Mathura at Patiali on the banks of the Ganga and established him there. A rich Amir of Delhi, Rawat Arz, gave his daughter Daulat Naz in marriage to Saifuddin. They had 4 children. The great poet of Hindustan, Yaminuddin Khusrau, was one of them. Before I lost my milk teeth, I was spouting rhyming couplets. My tutor would urge me to concentrate on pages of calligraphy, whilst I would slyly watch the pretty girls and write poems on their beauty. My maternal grandfather was extremely rich. There were 50 to 60 servants engaged for domestic duties alone. Kings come and went, but my father's position remained stable. He died at the age of 113. I was then 20 years old. Sultan Balban's empire had spread far and wide. I first went to the court of his nephew, Malik Chhajju. Sultan Balban's son, Bughra Khan, presented me with a platter full of gold sovereigns. Malik Chhajju was offended, but before he could slay me, I speedily escaped from there and went to Bughra Khan's place at Samana. By then, my first anthology of poems, Tuhfatus Sidr, had already reached him. Hassan Dehlvi and I stayed at the court of Prince Sultan Muhammad in Multan for 4.5 years. But soon the Mongol troops launched a massive attack, and the prince was slain in the fighting. I was captured. A Mongol knight tied me to his horse, and I was dragged along. As we approached a river, man and horse alike thirstily drank their fill. Both collapsed on the spot. I splashed my face with water and set off on my journey. Traveling through jungles, I finally reached Delhi. On the way, I wrote an elegy on the misfortunes of my last days in Multan. On arriving at Balban's court, I read out to him the elegy on his son. Balban and the entire populace wept. Balban died of grief. I left the city and returned to my village of Patiali. By this time, the hymns and verses of Amir Khusrau had become popular in every town and village. On the outskirts of a village, Khusrau came across 4 maidens drawing water from a well. The young girls demanded that the traveller first compose a verse on a drum, a dog, a rice pudding and a spinning wheel before they'd offer water to him to drink. The thirsty Khusrau composed a witty verse on the spot. Kheer pakai jatan se, charkha diya jalaye, kheer kutta kha gaya, tu baithi dhol bajaye. The Subedar of Awadh, Hathi Khan, was an admirer of mine. He sent for me. The placid banks of the river Sarju, the balmy air of Ayodhya, and the warmth of its people made me reluctant to leave them. I found Bengal a golden land, and Awadh enchanting. When I took leave of my friends, both they and I wept, and the skies also wept. On reaching Delhi, I wrote at the king's behest. It was my first long poem of 4,000 stanzas, Tiranu Sadain. People say I received a lot of gold, but if you ask me, I did not get enough even to cover the cost of the paper I wrote on. Anyway, what price can a king ever pay for my treasure of pearls? The old Sultan, Jalaluddin Khilji, put an end to the Sultanate, and the Afghans regained power. He summoned me and gave me the rank my Turkish father had enjoyed. My pay was to be 1,200 tanka per year, with servants at my disposal. My duty was to accompany the king wherever he went with a sword at my waist. Also, I must read to him from books whenever he wanted me to. Amir Khusrau had mastered not only the languages, but the different types of music of Sindh, Punjab and Bengal. In Delhi, he drew upon his knowledge of the various music forms and musical instruments and gave a tremendous impetus to Hindustani music. He encouraged and brought to the fore many new singers and musicians. A young girl, Turmati Khatun, was one such singer. I was tired of my daily attendance at court, so I requested the king to excuse me from this duty. Then I thought to myself, the great Nizami had once reigned supreme in the field of epic poetry. I would now reply to these 5-line verses. Khusrau got his opportunity in the last days of Alauddin Khilji. He wrote 5 eulogies of 18,000 stanzas. Apart from the king's court, there existed in Delhi yet another court, the doors of which were open to all, to the rich and the poor, Hindus and Muslims alike, and food was provided for all. Each day, from evening until midnight, Amir Khusrau began to spend his time at the feet of the great Sufi, Hazrat Nizamuddin. Alauddin Khilji's son Khizr Khan told Amir Khusrau of his love for Dawal Devi. Khusrau wrote a poem entitled Dawal Rani Khizr Khan on this tale of love. After the death of Khizr Khan, the Sultanate once again faced turmoil. The young Qutubuddin Mubarak Shah invaded Dakhan. Amir Khusrau went with him. The troops blazed a trail of victory all the way to Madurai. The art and culture of Marathwada won the heart of Khusrau. He wrote thousands of verses in ecstatic praise of Hindustan's culture and philosophy in his Masnavi No Se Paher. Amir Khusrau was with Sultan Qiyasuddin Tughlaq when he heard that Hazrat Nizamuddin lay desperately ill in Delhi. With great difficulty he got permission to leave and somehow reached Delhi in 2 months. By then, his guide and mentor, Nizamuddin, was no more. Amir Khusrau roamed the streets of Delhi, swathed in mourning robes, singing hymns in praise of his preceptor, and thousands of disconsolate mourners joined him. The beloved is no more. Khusrau homeward went. Dusk has fallen everywhere. And exactly 6 months later, on the same day, at the same time, Khusrau breathed his last. Amir Khusrau had lived at the courts of 11 kings and sung 400,000 verses. He is the only one of the Indian poets whose illustrated works are preserved with love and care in the biggest libraries of the world. The 11 kings are no more, but this poet and his spiritual guide, the Darwesh king Hazrat Nizamuddin, still reign in all their glory. His court still rings to the immortal verses of Amir Khusrau.
चल खुश